tuning and taking bits out and adding bits in and starting collaborating.
So Dave, you were involved in the business? And John McCann, in fact, not Scottish either, he is
John was from Portadown. We go way back as well, actually, because we both worked for a theatre company called Tinderbox in Belfast. So I've known John for about a decade now. But this is the first time we've worked with a writer.
It's his second play. I think in his first play was part of a sort of team night thing, so this is actually like his first professional
Yes.
done play.
I should say that he lives in Scotland, has lived in Scotland for about 7 8 years now. And he talks, although things have changed dramatically now in terms of the atmosphere up there. He talks about the fact that he wanted, he was surprised that not enough people years ago were talking about the referendum and what was likely to happen. And he wanted to pick up the pen and write about that. And he talks as well about Barack Obama, the fact that once he was voted in, people woke up the next morning thinking that everything was going to change and be rosy, and of course it wasn't. And just the idea of people getting mired in party politics and not being able to express their own opinions, and that's what Fiona's fight is about.
Rich, do you live in Scotland?
I don't know. I feel like I've been in the course of the last few months, but no, I don't. I live back in Wales.
So Dave, what is it like in Scotland at the moment, and also putting on this play during such a pivotal point in history?
Well, there was positive at one point that maybe the play would change every night or whatever, according to what was happening. But actually it stayed pretty much the same, but what's been different is the reaction to certain lines has been different as the months, as the weeks have progressed. So some lines are getting a big laugh out of it, there's finally a fucking it's getting a big laugh now.
Yeah, we spoke about it.
It's just a sort of, because there's been reference. So that's sort of changed. I think the atmosphere in Scotland, I mean, it's heated, and it's very passionate, you can tell that from the debates. There's like 8 debates happening all the time.
It's almost started to snowball really since that first debate, and then with this great back together YouTube video that came out last week.
That every new thing brings another
Yeah, issue.
But I think the most important thing is that it's staying just now is as high as it's projected to be, which is 70 every, say, possibly 80. That's been the kind of joyous aspect of it, because there's so much discussion of what country would you actually like to live in, and particularly young people, the apathy of looking, it's just getting a bit kind of hopeless politically. So it's certainly given a big surge to, the news during outside Glasgow pubs and pubs, people, a bit worse for the wear, still going strong, talking about it, so it's coming in all bases, so I think that is a good thing.
I know that Alex was talking about a possible 80% turnout in terms of the vote, and some people might even be higher than that. And I know in the referendum for the Good Friday Agreement that Mark references in play, there was the highest turnout ever. Back home, because essentially what people were saying, do we want peace or do we want continued battle days? So I think this kind of thing really generates a lot of interest, particularly amongst young people.
It is amazing. I went up to University Festival, and there are so many plays here in French on the subject. But I was quite amazed now coming back to London that there are so few. And it only seems now, when we're really in the final days up to the 18th, that people are here and taking notice. How do you find the audience reacting differently from Edinburgh to London?
A different reaction on the Irish speech. I'll be perfectly honest, because it gets more of a kind of, and I wouldn't shout it out last Saturday, and it was like, shout back at me. And I was like, whoa, this is how it to me. She was very annoyed, so that actually, it kind of had no purpose, I think.
I always think that there's going to be something big happens between the two of them there. The fact that he's able to keep his cool and leave the room says a lot about his state of mind. But I think a lot of people think that the Northern Irish particularly would be offended by that kind of stuff, but we've been saying that stuff for so many years.
Usually at the end of that we get the biggest laughs, and it's all done Irish people really, really laughing, but no, I wouldn't say it's any different in terms of the other content in the show. It's still, I mean, there's a bit of a felt
Whereas down here we were performing, I guess, to very much a multicultural audience, all of whom are bringing their own backgrounds into the theatre. So there's just maybe more of a muted response, more people listening intensely to what we're saying. So I don't know. Big ask.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm looking for hands now for questions from the audience. Oh, now come on. Don't be shy. Get someone here.
You mentioned about the youngsters and the activity in the past, but for the referendum coming up, does it smack of desperation when you're 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, or is it right to give them a chance to have say in what the future holds for the country?
Shall I repeat that question?
Please.
Yes. Gentleman's asking, given that 16 and 17-year-olds have been given the right to vote, does that smack of desperation because they may not be as well informed?
I guess in terms of both sides, there's been a lot of desperate tactics and I think back to myself when I was 16. I'm not sure whether or not
But
I would have the brain to
I don't know
that
if
stage
this is
to
true.
do
I
it.
think I had Jeremy Ryan the other day, they were talking about that, and he says that actually the 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds are voting no, and it's the 18, 19-year-olds veterans that are voting yes. And the point being that the Jeremy Ryan show was that you're more inclined to listen to your mum and dad at 16, 17 than you would be at 18, 19. So that's what was seeming. I can't remember. It's just something I don't know. But I know what you mean. It is desperate out there. They really need it. Both sides.
One thing that is for sure is that in the play we talk about it's the period of settlement talks, the independence has happened, it's the transitional talks towards full independence. And one thing they are saying about is, oh yeah, the SNP are going to be an 18-month process. What is clear is that it will not be.
Oh, it will be.
Some people are saying it may well take 10 years before it starts to resolve itself.
I think that's also why people don't know what, I think it's all wrong, but that neither side can actually say what it is they're going to do. Because they have to thrash it out around that table, before, and to the benefit of both, the Scottish side and England, Northern Ireland and Wales.
Was performing in this play anything that's different from the other person?
Yeah, well, I don't live in Scotland, I don't have a vote, but we never stop talking about what my vote might be. I am a Northern Irish Protestant by birth, and I suppose my tendencies would normally be pro-union, but I'm also a Northern Irishman who does relish the idea of a united Ireland, if it was possible. I don't know whether it would be. So I've kind of gone from being a definite no to now I'm a professional fence sitter. I'm not too sure. I've seen the arguments on both sides. I don't know. I think for a lot of those don't knows, it's going to be a voting with their heart. Just going in and saying, do we passionately believe in an independent future for this country, or are we too scared when we get bitter more guy?
I think for a lot of them, certainly a lot of the next voters I know, it's a policy driven thing. It's about the policies that the Scottish Independence Party. That's why they had a landslide at the last time they were in the election, purely because of the policies on education, education, free prescription. That was the key. I know that's what lots of friends. Also, this is going beyond that. But I think the policy thing, that was the driving. That's the driving force for people because they want a more left-wing government than say the Labour government would suggest them, because obviously Scotland's just a neighbour across the board, so that has been a main point really of the whole. It's to me anything else, anti-sentiments and all that, it's just disgusting. So,
Mark talks in the play about the fact that he sees Scotland as a fresh start, as a cleaner version of his own country. And I completely can relate to that. That everything back home just gets caught up in are you Catholic, are you Protestant, the sectarianism, the bigotry, that I'm envious.
What was it John said, there would be blood on people's hands whoever gets the dominant power in Northern Ireland. So there's too much blood, literally blood.
But that's
That's not a problem at all.
yes, and in Scotland they're able to talk openly about policy, about education, transport, nuclear disarmament, all of these kind of things. But I'm kind of jealous of that. You're actually able to talk openly about those things without anything else getting in the way. So
But yeah, cautiously.
For the Irishman here, did you see Bob Geldof? So Bob Geldof says that he's the first Scots to reject independence, and he says nationalism is a very dangerous political animal. I know this. I'm Irish. Trade on nationalism is a cheap political trick. I don't know. Should we get him here?
I'm very good at going. Southern Irishman, something like that, or I've heard so far, but I don't know. I find it.
I don't think it will be any big change. It feels like this is the regular way of thinking. Because it takes so long, and it will be federalism if it does happen, which in all of those vote statistics is not yes or no. You know, I know that it makes it story, but all along it will be behind. So it will be amazing. It'll be astonishing if we did it. You know, I think people will be naturally cautious, but
I'm very wary of celebrities kind of offering things.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that's for the simple reason that you walk there, you get papers through the words to say, you know, so and so from Game of Thrones. He's voting yes. Why aren't you? Well, you know, until I actually saw that paper, I didn't know what to do, but now you're saying, I vote yes.
I was going to ask you, that was such an enormous backlash when the celebrities from Judy Dench to all sorts of theatre people said that we should vote no. And from my perspective, I thought, well, my initial reaction in ignorance was, that's great that they're concerned enough to have an oppose it. But then I read some of the comments on the national newspapers in Scotland, and it was, oh my gosh, it really didn't go down well.
You know, and I was concerned with all of Kintyres when we played those.
you can understand it. The majority of my family live in London, you know, and it's very hard. It's like, you know, my brother-in-law too, but a lot of them have Scottish parents or grandparents or something. They're all passionate and know, you know, because it's very, they look, you know, very
It's
short.
like England is the spouse that everyone looks to before. I'm the American, so I'm just looking for other good ones. Hands, comments, gentlemen.
I was intrigued about if you found while you were developing the play, one play you developed, what out of the debate and the way in which the artists' campaigns are independent, like National Collective, and what they've kind of created might have helped shape, you know, especially your character. Presumably you're, if I understand correctly, you're not actually a politician during, you know, before. You're almost someone that's just, you know, on the sidelines coming through. So you're imagining to be one of those people, an artist, or you know.
She's a talented person, she was a nurse.
Yeah.
She came from the NHS background.
Yeah.
That's yes, sort of
So you're imagining someone coming from outside of politics and trying to push it along. Yeah, that to me has felt like the really big thing that's happened has been that this hasn't been a debate about politicians. So how is that, you know, did you feel you had to go out and experience that, you know, directly, or was it just in the air enough that you could see
all
that?
in the air, but the play was written last year. So, and this, the National Collective and all these internet and all these sites, and because it's all viral now, especially from younger people, so all of that, yeah, I mean, it's all happening, definitely, but I know that Travers do not want a play that is going to be tough on the yes or tough on the no, because it's their job to, it's their job to ask questions. So she wanted a play that would hopefully ask enough questions, you know, but without, because it's not the Travis Stewart job to, you know, yes, yeah, we think of the last time, you know, yes, or no theatre, and all that Lachlan is actually London Irish, and she got very sort of, didn't like that, it's like just about asking the questions from the
A lot of those ideas that were happening in the news around the play when we bring them into rehearsal and discuss them, and then probably a lot of them fed into what we're doing on stage. But the play is a little bit of political idealism.
Yeah.
You know, if you could step out of party politics and have your political dream and what taste would it have? You know, and I think that's all it is. You know, I don't think it's a yes play or a no play. I think it's somewhere in the middle. And at the end, when the two of them go out, you can see the fear in their eyes. They don't know what's going to happen. I think both of them might lose their jobs. Maybe the people will get behind them and say, yeah,
just stop. It's easy to from the outside and down here. Look, things have been, we're very civilised for a long while, which is nice, and lately it's become a bit unpleasant. I mean, somebody had to stop campaigning for a few days. And so it seems to me that the Scots are always united, which was great against the English, but they're united. It seems it's divided people because whatever happens, either way, because it seems very, very close, a lot of people are going to be terribly unhappy. And if it goes against, if it no win, which is possible, I don't know, but if it goes that way, then what happens to Alex Salmond and the SMB, because that's their whole existence. And if everyone says, well, what happens to Alex Salmond and the SMB? I know you don't know.
I think they'll just go back to the party in power and continue doing policies the way they do, and that's because they've been in power in Scotland for the past 10 years. So they will just go back to that, and especially the rule, and then come up again. But I think they're right. I think if it's very close, that will be very tough for both sides. But I think it's I don't know whether it's being exaggerated that the votes getting close as that. I don't know. Certainly before I left, it was 37. There was enough gap.
Well, the big group seems to be the I don't know. You know, whenever I see television, a lot of people could be saying, I don't know. But there isn't an I don't know box.
I know.
And I don't know, often they would be more afraid of
So this
So
was
it's not so far from intelligence.
but there's a lot of ones. Time will tell. No, there's a lot of unanswerables. I think
Yeah.
everyone admits that. And that's why this idea of 18 months is just ridiculous. We don't know.
Either side can't tell us what they're going to